Welcome to this episode of the weekly News Roundup. We move first to the United States, where American President Donald Trump has said that the US will likely impose a 100% tariff on Russia and threatened sanctions on buyers of Russian exports, including oil, if it does not end hostilities with Ukraine. But Trump's threat of sanctions came with a 50-day grace period. Trump said during a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House, "We are going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days, tariffs at about 100%. Trump said that the US would also impose 100% secondary tariffs, targeting Russia's remaining trade partners if a peace deal with Ukraine was not reached within 50 days. This would see any country that trades with Russia face the tax if they want to sell their products to the US. So, how does this affect India? We are one of the largest buyers of Russian oil. So if India keeps buying oil from Russia, US companies that purchase Indian goods would have to pay a 100% import tax or tariff when the products reach American shores. This would make the goods so expensive that US businesses would likely choose to buy them cheaper from elsewhere, resulting in lost revenue for India. The intention is also to hobble Russia's economy. Theoretically, if Moscow was unable to generate money by selling oil to other nations, it would also have less money to finance its war in Ukraine. Given that oil and gas account for almost a third of Moscow's state revenue and more than 60% of its exports, 100% tariffs could make something of a dent in Russia's finances. We bring you this report.
US President Donald Trump met with NATO Chief General Mark Rutte in Washington. The main areas of discussion were the Russia-Ukraine war and also NATO's role in it. At the meeting, Trump said, "We want to make sure Ukraine can do what it wants to do." Rutte confirmed the US had decided to massively supply Ukraine with what is necessary through NATO and that the Europeans would foot the bill. European countries will send Kyiv their own Patriot air defense systems, which Ukraine relies on to repel Russia's deadly airstrikes, and replacements will then be issued by the US. US President Donald Trump has announced the US will send top-of-the-line weapons to Ukraine via NATO countries, while also threatening Russia with severe tariffs if a deal to end the war is not reached within 50 days.
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. It can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it.
Neither Rutte nor Trump elaborated on the weaponry that will be sent to Kiev, but Rutte said the deal included missiles and ammunition. However, the president did say top-of-the-line weapons worth billions of dollars would be quickly distributed to the battlefield in order to support Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky said on X that he spoke with Trump after his meeting with Rutte and thanked him for his willingness to support Ukraine and to continue working together to stop the killings and establish a lasting and just peace.
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything. My conversations with him are always very pleasant. I say, isn't that a very lovely conversation? And then the missiles go off that night. I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit.
We move now to the path-breaking mission of Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla, the first Indian to visit the International Space Station, who safely returned to Earth as the SpaceX Dragon capsule made a successful splashdown off the California coast. The Axiom 4 cruise return marks a monumental moment for India's space ambitions and ISRO's upcoming Gaganyaan mission. Shukla's return is not just a homecoming, it's a proud page in India's space history. We bring you this report.
Astronaut Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla has safely returned to the Earth, splashing down with the crew after an 18-day mission aboard the International Space Station. Shukla, along with 3 other astronauts, splashed down on Earth on Tuesday after completing the private Axiom 4 mission. They returned to Earth after a 22-hour journey aboard SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft. He became only the second Indian to travel to space after Rakesh Sharma's 1984 trip as part of a Soviet-Russian mission. He also became the first Indian to travel to the ISS for 18 days, the longest stint. Emerging from the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft with a bright smile, mission pilot Shukla appeared cheerful and composed as he experienced gravity for the first time in over 2 weeks. During his time in orbit, Shukla was instrumental in carrying out more than 60 scientific experiments spanning plant biology, material science, and artificial intelligence. Notably, his leadership in the Sprouts project, an experiment focused on plant growth in microgravity, has garnered widespread scientific interest for its potential and applications in long-duration space travel and sustainable agriculture on Earth. His successful return marks the end of a high-impact mission and opens the door to a new frontiers in space-based research. His father Shambhu Dayal and mother Asha Shukla, with his sister Suchi Shukla, celebrate his successful docking at the ISS. We see Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla reunited with his wife Kamna Shukla and 6-year-old son Kiyash Shukla after his 18-day mission aboard the International Space Station. Kamna and Kiyash were by his side in Houston, Texas. It was the first time Shukla saw his family in 2 months. He wrote an Instagram post, "It was challenging. Coming back to Earth and holding my family back in my arms felt like home." He added, "Human spaceflight missions are magical, but they are made magical by the humans. Spaceflight is amazing, but seeing your loved ones after a long time is equally amazing. Find a loved one today and tell them that you love them. We often get busy in life and forget how important the people in our lives are. Human spaceflight missions are magical, but they are made magical by the humans."
We move now to the latest reports on the deadly crash of Air India flight AI-171, bound for London, which crashed in Ahmedabad on 12th of June, killing all but one of the 242 people on board and 19 others on the ground. According to a preliminary report by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, moments after takeoff, both the switches in the cockpit that controlled the fuel going to the engines had been moved to the cut-off position. Moving the fuel switches almost immediately cuts the engine. We try to analyze what this means because the authorities have not yet released the whole transcript of the plane's data and voice recorders. We bring you this report.
A month after the crash, investigators have made a chilling discovery. Fuel to both engines of the Air India plane appear to have been cut off seconds after the flight took off, a preliminary report has found. A leading aviation safety expert has suggested that the fatal crash of the Air India Flight 171 may have been the result of deliberate human action, raising for the first time the possibility of a pilot-induced crash. Drawing on information gathered from the plane's data and voice recorders which were recovered after the crash, the report added that in the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, "Why did he cut off?" referring to the fuel switch. The other pilot responded that he did not do so. Seconds after the plane began losing altitude, and an emergency message was transmitted from the cockpit to air traffic control just before it crashed to the ground outside the airport perimeter. According to the report, the fuel switches were moved to cut off one after another. Seconds later, the switches were moved back to turn the fuel back on, and one of the plane's engines was able to restart, but could not reverse the plane's deceleration. It did not identify which remarks were made by the flight's captain and which by the first officer, nor which pilot transmitted "Mayday" just before the crash. The commanding pilot of the Air India plane was 56-year-old Sumit Sabharwal, who had a total flying experience of over 15,000 hours, and according to the Indian government was also an Air India instructor. His co-pilot was 32-year-old Clive Kunder, who had over 3,400 hours of total experience. The preliminary findings did not say how the fuel switches could have flipped to the cutoff position and cut off the engines. The switches are equipped with safeguards, including a locking mechanism, to prevent accidental movement. They are most often used to turn engines off once a plane has arrived at its airport gate, and in certain emergency situations such as an engine fire. The report does not indicate there was any emergency requiring an engine cutoff. A US aviation safety expert has said that a pilot would not be able to accidentally move the fuel switches that feed the engines. Another US aviation expert asked a very pertinent question. If they were moved because of a pilot, why? Since all the voice transcripts and data from the flight recorder have not been released, we will have to wait and see how the investigation progresses.
We move back to the US right now in continuation of the massive flash floods that swept parts of Texas and caused enormous damage and loss of lives, with dozens still missing. The threat of additional rain has led to various flash floods warnings in central Texas. Over the last week, several motorists were rescued after driving into high water. The US National Weather Service has forecast thunderstorms capable of producing excessive rainfall and potential flooding. The warning has prompted one of the worst hit counties, Kerr County, to ask its rescuers to halt search operations for victims of the deadly floods that occurred in the Texas Hill County region just over a week ago. We bring you this report.
At least 134 people are dead after devastating flooding in the Texas Hill Country that began early on July 4th. The number of missing persons stand at 101. Search operations are ongoing in the Kerr Country. As rescue teams continue their search for flooding victims, a flash flood watch has been issued in the Texas Hill Country. The number of missing persons stand at 101, more than 1 week after the devastating flooding that struck Texas. Search efforts are ongoing. Heavy rain has moved into the search area of the Guadalupe River, forcing search and recovery operations to stop and then restart, according to a county official. The cadaver dogs detect the scent of bodies, giving a positive mark to their handlers, and the searchers start digging into the ravaged landscape. Power saws whirred as they cleared the bigger trees. Nearby searchers on their knees dug with their hands through muddy soil and rubble. The smell of decay wafted through the air. Among the dead are livestock and other animals that also were carried away by the fast-moving waters. When searchers get a mark, they'll use equipment to hopefully clear some of the heavier debris and keep them hand-poking and digging. The scene plays out over and over along piles of debris stretching for miles, largely along the Guadalupe River, which severely flooded early Friday and winds through 40 miles of Kerr County, where the toll is the worst. Nearly 100 deaths there alone, including 36 children. The debris stretches several more miles downriver where some bodies also have been found. More than a month's worth of rain had fallen in the area overnight on July 4th, swelling part of the Guadalupe River from about 3 feet to 30 feet in just 45 minutes and transforming the waterway into a killer. The flooding laid waste to communities across Kerr and Kendall counties, where neighborhoods and RV parks, as well as the 18 or so youth camps attended by thousands of kids each summer, were swept away in its fury. Flash floods are common in Texas Hill Country, where Kerrville is located, but National Weather Service forecasts predicted less rain than ultimately descended on July 4th. And by the time officials learned that lives were in jeopardy, many homes along the river were already submerged or washed away. Texas's deadliest freshwater flooding in more than a century quickly killed numerous people, including locals celebrating the US Independence Day, child campers and camp leaders, while destroying homes, businesses, and cabins. We hope and pray that the rescuers who are searching so tirelessly are able to find more survivors.
We move now to the Vatican, where Pope Leo XIV is on a vacation in Castel Gandolfo. In the middle of this vacation, Pope Leo found the time to meet the poor clerics of Albano who live in the nearby monastery and who pray constantly for him as successor to the throne of Peter. We bring you this report.
After celebrating Mass in the chapel of the Carabinieri station in Castel Gandolfo, Pope Leo headed to the nearby monastery, where he was warmly welcomed by the nuns. The pontiff paused in prayer in the chapel, sharing a moment of silence and contemplation with the sisters, whom he later greeted individually, emphasizing that it is beautiful that the Church knows your life because it is a valuable testimony. This unexpected encounter left a trail of tenderness, reflected in the joyful and grateful faces of the Sisters of St. Clare, whose mission is to pray for the Pope, the Church, and all of Vatican City. The Monastery of the Poor Clares of Albano, founded in 1631 during the pontificate of Urban VIII, has maintained a special connection with the Holy See since its origins. Throughout the centuries, the nuns have lived a life of silence, prayer, and contemplation in this monastery, faithful to the charism of Saint Clare of Assisi. They have also received visits from pontiffs, especially during the summer months. Pope St. John Paul II, during a meeting with them, stated that, "Of all the people the Pope loves most, you are certainly the most precious. The Vicar of Christ has an extreme need for your spiritual help and counts above all on you, who by divine vocation have chosen the better part, which is silence, prayer, contemplation, the exclusive love of God." Aware of this tradition, Pope Leo XIV chose to greet them personally. Before saying goodbye, he signed the monastery's Book of Honor and prayed the Lord's Prayer with the sisters. As a sign of gratitude, Pope Leo gave the community a chalice and paten for the celebration of Holy Mass, and the sisters in turn presented him with an icon of the face of Jesus.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. Until we meet next time, stay blessed.